The new year is upon us once again for like the 73rd time this year, folks, as the New Year's apparative one and done match event has returned, and with it comes the introduction of New Year Akari's banner and the rerun of New Year Haruna and New Year Fuuka's banners, as well as New Year Junko, the event's warfare unit, who I will sadly not be covering in today's video. So, without further ado, here is a short review on all three New Year goals. Kicking things off with the brand new unit, New Year Akari, who might I say, looks stunning in her kimono. And to be honest, I feel like she's one of the more underrated hot characters, cause let me tell ya, her kimono version really activates my neurons. The combination of her black ensemble, from her kimono to those gloves, and that flower on her head, all of which really suit her, alongside that beautiful blonde ponytail and those big mommy milkers. It's no wonder she's part of the Dryness squad. She is a permanent special mystic tactical support unit who has B combat power in urban terrains, S in field, and D indoors. She uses this set of equipment, which gives her a ton of HP since she can act as a tank alongside attack and crit to improve her damage dealing capabilities. Now, time to take a gander at her skills. New Year Akari has a 5-cost EX skill where she deploys and boards the school lunch promotion vehicle for 30 seconds, granting it a percentage of her max HP. However, this vehicle is unable to launch normal attacks and only one TS vehicle may be deployed at a time. When deployed, the vehicle has its own basic and enhanced skills. Its basic skill allows Akari to deal damage to enemies in a round-shaped area every 13 seconds, and with its enhanced skill, while it is on field, it will constantly emit an aura in a circular area around itself, increasing the attack speed and mystic effectiveness of all allies within range, excluding herself. For Akari's own basic skill, she forms a circular area around the ally with the lowest HP every 40 seconds, increasing their defense as well as other allies who are in range of the circular area. Her enhanced skill boosts her max HP, and her sub-skill increases all allies' mystic effectiveness. At UE 40, her enhanced skill plus grants her extra max HP, and at UE 50, her field combat power improves from S to SS. New Year Akari is one of the very few support TS units, with the only other being Senna, who is a healer, and the rest primarily being damage dealers. But she is a pretty good one. Firstly, the vehicle has a strong enhanced skill, as when deployed, she is able to provide a 31.5% AoE mystic effectiveness buff to your entire team at max level EX, as well as increasing their attack speed by 39%, and these buffs have a lengthy duration of 30 seconds, since her EX lasts for that amount of time. While her buff values don't seem that high, she has the benefit of covering two roles at once, i.e. being both an attack speed and mystic effectiveness buffer. Plus, as I mentioned, these buffs are AoE with a wide range, thus making her an excellent supporter for teams with multiple blue AA DPS units, as she is able to buff all of them in one go. The best thing, however, is that they are considered aura buffs, meaning you'll be able to stack other direct attack speed and mystic effectiveness buffs on top of New Year Akari's. For example, you may combine New Year Akari's attack speed buffs with Onsen Shinatsu's, giving that particular unit a 99% attack speed buff. Or you can stack New Year Kayoko's 92.8% mystic effectiveness buff on New Year Akari's 31.5%, thus increasing that unit's blue weakness damage by a whopping 124.3%. From my general understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, you should also be able to stack New Year Akari's buffs even with other units' AoE buffs. For example, Swimsuit Memori's attack speed buffs, since the former is counted as an aura plus enhanced skill buff, meaning they are aura buffs coming from the enhanced skill, which is currently pretty unique to TS students, and no other striker unit has aura buffs in their enhanced slot, so you can stack other units' attack speed / mystic effectiveness buffs with hers. Not only that, while the vehicle isn't able to launch any normal attacks, New Year Akari still has damage dealing capabilities with her basic skill, being able to deal pretty decent AoE damage with its 553% multiplier at level 5 EX. And she will be able to proc this skill twice since her deployment period lasts for 30 seconds and this skill activates every 13 seconds. Other than that, she also has a very useful sub-skill, being able to passively increase your entire team's mystic effectiveness by 30.2% at level 10. And since this stacks with the vehicle's enhanced skill, she is basically able to grant your entire team a 60% blue weakness damage buff, making her a great unit for any blue content and mystic team. Finally, the vehicle itself has quite a lot of HP, even more so with UE40 New Year Akari, allowing her to sort of act as the team's tank, which is great because there isn't any risk if she dies, since you can just resummon her again. As I previously mentioned, New Year Akari is a good supporter for any blue content, being mostly used in a bunch of blue raids, where she fits into almost any mystic team. Her main role in these raids is to provide huge mystic effectiveness and attack speed buffs to your whole team, especially your DPS units, substantially boosting their damage output. And so, ideally, you would want to use her in a team with multiple blue AA DPS units. In terms of raids, she sees quite a bit of use in Gauze, where her attack speed buffs can be valuable since AA units are good in this raid. Shirokuro, as she has very recently been used quite a lot in this raid in JP this week, since AA units are also valuable against them, a bit in Perorodzilla, and some blue armored Grand Assault raids, though she is often only really used on Torment difficulty as opposed to Insane or below, serving as an additional buffer for one of your Torment teams. However, her best use actually lies in Blue Armored Fury of Set due to a few reasons. Firstly, in this mode, you will need to bring in more than one DPS student, significantly increasing the value of AoE buffers like New Year Akari over single target ones, as they require less time and cost to use since they are able to buff all your striker units with one EX application. With New Year Akari, she can buff your DPS units' attack speed and mystic effectiveness with just one use of her EX, greatly increasing your entire team's damage output. And this buff lasts for the entire duration she is on the battlefield. Also, if the vehicle is destroyed or once the 30 seconds is up, you can deploy her once again pretty quickly, cause remember, her 5 cost in this mode is basically nothing due to how quick your cost meter recovers. Furthermore, her attack speed buff is extremely valuable in FOS. AA units such as Kuroko, Sakurako, and Yuya Izuna are highly preferred for this mode, with most players bringing in multiple AA DPS units like them. This makes Yuya Akari very useful for this raid, since she can provide a 31.5% attack speed increase to all your Mystic AA DPS students, allowing them to hit faster, potentially letting them activate their basic skills quicker, or launching more augmented normal attacks and etc. Subsequently increasing their damage output. All these make New Year Akari an excellent unit for Blue Armored FOS, being one of the first picks in many players' teams, and she is used even on the higher difficulty floors like floor 100 to floor 124. Though now, with the existence of Kuroko, in my opinion, you don't exactly need New Year Akari since the former makes this content much easier, as she is able to shred through set even without New Year Akari, leaving room for other special units. Overall, New Year Akari is a great Mystic TS supporter who is useful for a lot of blue content, though she mainly excels in Blue Fury of Set, where she is an important unit in making this content significantly easier. Thus, in my opinion, if you want to prepare for Blue FOS when it arrives, so that you have a smoother time in this mode, especially on the higher floors, which are much tougher, then you may pull for her. Not only that, I also personally feel that you may pull for her if you want a good backup Mystic supporter, especially maybe if you aren't that comfy in blue raids, though you certainly have better options, or you plan to take on Torment difficulty. However, in my eyes, there are also several reasons to skip her, one of which is to pull for New Year Fuuka instead, specifically if you don't have her, as she is a must pull unit and you should prioritize getting her, again, if you don't have her. You can also skip New Year Akari if you want to pull for New Year Haruna instead, especially since the former is permanent and the latter is a limited unit. Finally, you may skip her cause she isn't exactly an essential unit for most blue raids. And since Blue FOS has been made much easier with Kuroko, you can just wait for her to arrive instead so you can rely on her, unless of course you want New Year Akari for reassurances. though, if you're one of the rare Akari bros, then you may just disregard everything I just said and go ahead and pull for her. Moving on to the returning characters, starting with the cute and caring head of Gehenna School Lunch Club, Fuuka. Seeing her in a kimono brings a tear to my eye, cause she looks so beautiful and refined. The mix of pink and white on her kimono shows off her girlish side, as well as the flowers on her hair. And don't get me started on those strands of hair hanging from her horns. It makes her look so adorable. I also love how hardworking she is even during the New Year's. Adorably riding that scooter, delivering noodles, sushi, and all kinds of delicacies, while still making sure us senseis are properly fed by making us a delicious bento. Cute, caring, hardworking, honest, amazing at cooking, having a hilarious expression whenever something goes wrong. It's no wonder she's the only one who canonically received an I love you from sensei, and is one of the top wife candidates among all the students in the game. So fellas, make sure to pat and love your Fuuka, cause she deserves it. Fuuka is a limited special piercing supporter who is average in urban terrains, bad in field, and excellent indoors. These are the equipment she uses, which is pretty similar to a bunch of other support units, and the necklace is particularly important as it gives more healing stats. Let's take a look at her skills. Her 3-cost EX, which converts to 2 costs at max level, increases 1 unit's crit damage for 35 seconds, while simultaneously cutting the cost of that unit's next EX skill use by 50%, with the amount reduced being rounded down. Her basic skill casts a shield around the ally with the lowest HP every 60 seconds, with this barrier lasting for 20 seconds. Her enhanced skill improves her healing, and her sub-skill boosts all allies' attack. She receives more healing at UE40 through her enhanced skill plus, and her indoor combat power is upgraded from S to SS at UE50. As you all probably already know, Fuuka is one of the best and most meta buffers in the game, and this is primarily due to her EX skill. Firstly, she can increase one ally's crit damage by a decent amount, granting a 32.1% crit damage buff at max level EX, though this buff does last for quite some time at 35 seconds. While her crit damage buff is way less potent compared to other units like Akko and Dressaru, however, her EX has one unique ability, aka she can reduce that particular unit's EX skill cost by half for the next use. And in my opinion, this is the main reason why she is so strong. This ability is no joke, since it is extremely useful on units with high EX skill costs such as Hoshino, Mika, Hina, Yukari, Ben Yoshimi, and etc., as she basically half their costs, allowing for faster EX skill activations and rotations. And this makes her extremely versatile for any piece of content. Moreover, since her EX is a single target buff, it means that Fuuka is much more effective in teams with one hyper carry, where you would focus on using her EX to solely buff and cut the cost of that main DPS student, all for the very low cost of 2 at level 5 EX. In fact, this is why she is the best partner for Mika. While our Gorilla Princess has a very powerful EX skill, making her the main DPS unit for most yellow teams, unfortunately it has a pretty steep cost of 6. Fuuka helps overcome this problem, decreasing it all the way down to 3 costs, allowing you to proc her EX much faster. She can also give her a small crit damage boost, which might not seem like a lot, but remember, Mika does have guaranteed crit, so she doesn't need any crit rate buffs, and Fuuka's crit damage buff is sufficient. Speaking of which, I personally feel that Fuuka can act as a good replacement for Akko. Even though Akko's crit focus buffs are much stronger than Fuuka's, and Akko has the added advantage of increasing crit chance, however, there's no denying that the latter's core support abilities are amazing and useful, allowing her to replace the former in certain team comps and situations. For example, if you use the Akko Himari combo with Mika, you will need about 12 costs to fully complete this setup, but you can replace Akko with Fuuka instead, reducing the total cost needed to 8, as Fuuka will lessen the 6 cost burden, plus like I previously mentioned, Mika has guaranteed crit, so she doesn't require Akko's crit rate buff. You may also pair Fuuka alongside someone like Hina over Akko, cause Hina too has an expensive 6 cost EX, though this might make you experience some crit mult since she won't have Akko's crit rate buff. Regardless, course, none of these mean that New Year Fuuka is superior to Akko or vice versa, and who you use depends on the units you bring and the situation you're in. Other than that, New Year Fuuka can also substitute Ui, the other cost reduction unit. The Stinky Librarian's cost support abilities might be slightly stronger since she can cut the cost of the DPS units next to EX skill users, as opposed to New Year Fuuka's 1, which allows for stronger damage bursts as you can proc the DPS unit's half cost EX skill more times. However, New Year Fuuka has the benefit of being a special unit, making her much more flexible and versatile as you can use her in any team and content, since she is unkillable. Whereas for Ui, because she is a striker, you aren't able to use her in certain content, specifically those that have enemies with explosive attack type, as they will deal 2 times damage to her, causing her to easily die and you lose her cost support abilities. So, from these two comparisons, as you can tell, New Year Fuuka is a hybrid of both Ui and Akko, combining their abilities into her EX at half efficiency, and who you use mainly depends on your team/roster and the battle you're entering. Moving on from her EX, New Year Fuuka also has one of the best sub-skills in the game, i.e. she is able to passively increase your entire team's attack by 17% at max level sub-skill, further boosting their DPS. And lastly, she has a decent basic skill, as she can cast a pretty beefy shield that gets stronger with her Enhance and Enhance Skill Plus, which could protect and save your student from lethal attacks. But unfortunately, it takes a whole minute to proc and it only lasts for a short period of time of 20 seconds, making it quite unreliable, though if it activates at the proper time, it could prove to be useful. As one of the best buffers in the game, New Year Fuuka is important in literally almost every single content, from low-end ones like missions, scrimmages and bounties, to late-game stuff like joint firing drills and raids. In these content, she has a relatively simple role. Use her cheap EX to cut the main hyper carry's expensive EX skill down to half, while simultaneously granting them a crit damage boost and pairing her with other hyper buffers like Himari to massively increase their damage output. She also acts as an attack stat stack, passively increasing your team's attack through her sub skill, and occasionally casts a strong shield to prevent your student with the lowest health from dying. Not to mention, using her allows for more flexibility in building an efficient team, as she takes on 2 roles at once, core support and crit buffer, letting you use other units that are essential for that particular content. In terms of raids, she sees a lot of usage in literally every single one, regardless of difficulty. Pinna, Terurotzilla, Titan, Kurokage, HOD, Wakamo Hovercraft, every single one. While she might not necessarily be chosen over Akko or Ui in certain situations, depending on the raid or difficulty or your team, nevertheless, she can still be a vital unit for any raid. As for Fury of Set, while New Year Fuuka is still a solid option for this mode, however, she isn't really first choice since FOS mainly requires AoE buffers, and there are also other special units who are of a higher importance in this mode. As for PvP, she also isn't used as much in this mode due to other special units being more suitable. Overall, New Year Fuuka is an extremely powerful unit who has risen up to be one of the game's meta buffers, as she is a combination of both Akko and Ui, though admittedly she is less potent than them. Thus, I would personally place her in the must-pull category, as she will greatly help you in literally almost every single content in the game. If you're pulling for her, in my opinion, 3 to 5 star New Year Fuuka is more than sufficient. While UE40 does give New Year Fuuka more healing, increasing the strength of her shield, which can help with survivability, especially on the harder difficulties. Unless you have a buttload of pyroxenes lying about, you don't have to go for it as it isn't as important, and you can slowly upgrade her to UE40 using your Eligmas. You may also pull for her if you're a limited collector, since she is limited, or if she's your waifu, to which I say based. Lastly, the only reason you would want to skip New Year Fuuka is if you already have her in your roster and A, you want to pull for New Year Haruna instead, maybe because she's your wife / you don't have her as she is also limited, or B, you're saving for other future units. Otherwise though, if you don't have New Year Fuuka, I highly recommend you pull for her, cause if not, you may come to sorely regret it. And I mean, come on, who could say no to such a cute wife in a kimono who will cook delicious meals for you every every day. Next up, we got the leader of the Gourmet Research Society. It's the beautiful, elegant, and batshit crazy food terrorist, New Year Haruna. Whilst her portrait's art style isn't exactly my favorite, I still love her New Year design. She looks really pretty in that blue kimono and that black fur thingy, plus I especially adore her silver hair being tied up in a bun with those bangs, and her adorable little bat wing. She has the appearance of a rich, refined young lady with that look. And I have to say, she also gives off the vibe of a perfect girlfriend whom you're going on a New Year's date with, visiting shrines and trying out the New Year cuisines at the local shops. Until she eats something that isn't up to her standards, and that's when the date goes to shit. I also like to mention, I love her L2D because of how bright and aesthetic it looks. And it's definitely up there as one of my favorite L2Ds. Also cause that homemade shrimp bowl looks delish. Finally, despite being a food terrorist and a kidnapper, Haruna is actually one of my favorite students cause 1. Filthy Gehenna, 2. Silver hair, 3. She's really pretty, and 4. I find it really endearing how she's in love with Sensei and is pretty open about it. I don't know, something about that really makes my heart flutter. Though I will say how Sensei is fine with her blowing up restaurants and whatnot, but gets all pissy when Maki plays a small prank or when Mika sends one too many harmless messages is baffling to me. New Year Haruna is a limited explosive DPS striker with light armor who has D combat power in urban terrains, S in field and B indoors. The equipment she uses is almost similar to the typical DPS equipment set, except she rocks gloves instead of hat. Now for New Year Haruna's skills. Starting with her 5-cost EX, which lets her deal damage to 5 different enemies, whilst inflicting additional damage to both the target and other enemies in a circular area around said targets. If there are less than 5 enemies, the explosions go back to the first enemy, and if there's only one target, the enemy will receive all the explosions. Love the EX animation, by the way. The change in her expression as she slowly lifts up the detonator is hilarious. A basic skill, which activates every 40 seconds, increases her attack for 30 seconds. Her enhanced skill amplifies her attack, and with her sub-skill, her attacks have a fixed 20% chance of applying a 17-second defense down debuff, with a 5-second cooldown between activations. Her enhanced skill plus at UA 40 provides her with additional explosive effectiveness, and her field combat power at UA 50 is boosted from S to SS. New Year Haruna is a strong explosive damage dealer who has a pretty powerful EX skill. For starters, it is capable of dealing both single target and AoE damage, i.e. you can either focus all its damage onto one specific target, cause remember, if there's only one enemy, all 5 hits will be concentrated on them, kind of like Midori's EX. Or you can use it to hit up to 5 enemies, with extra tiny AoE damage also being dealt around each target you hit. Not only that, if her EX is directed onto one enemy, it actually hits them with 10 explosions, cause again, her EX works like this. The target will first receive the initial explosion, and then they will be damaged with another weaker explosion. So if there are 5 targets, each of them will take damage twice from 2 explosions. But if there's only one enemy, then all 10 explosions will be concentrated on them, dealing a ton of damage. I hope that makes sense. Speaking of, New Year Haruna's EX can also inflict quite a lot of damage, even though her numbers aren't that great, with a multiplier of 202% for the first explosion at max level and 98.7% for the second AoE explosion. It can actually pack quite a punch, especially due to her other skills. Her basic skill is great at improving her damage, providing her with a 30.3% attack boost at level 10, and it has a short downtime of 10 seconds, though the initial activation time of 40 seconds is pretty lengthy. Combine this with another unit's attack buff, for instance Himari's EX, and her damage output is further increased. Her enhanced skill also ups the damage dealt by her EX with another attack boost, but unlocking her enhanced skill plus at UA 40 unleashes her true damage potential, as she gains a huge 50% explosive effectiveness buff at max level, which can massively increase the damage she deals. And since it comes from her enhanced skill, it can stack with other EE buffs, for instance Swimsuit Hoshino's EX or Minori's / Swimsuit Fubuki sub-skills, allowing her to hit like a truck. Finally, her sub-skill is decent, as she can passively apply defense debuffs on the enemy, though her defense shred values aren't that great, reducing the enemy's defense by around only 15% even at max level sub, and it also only has a 20% chance of activating. Nevertheless, this skill can slightly help with increasing your team's damage against enemies with high defense, as she could have a niche role as a defense debuffer, but I personally wouldn't rely on it since it has a low chance of proccing. With all that being said, she has a couple of weaknesses. For one, her EX is pretty costly at 5 costs, which is kinda steep. And two, while she may be a competent raid AoE and single target damage dealer, the fact that she takes on 2 roles at once means she isn't as potent as other raid damage dealers who are specialists in either role. As a raid AoE damage dealer, New Haruna can be used in PvE content that contain a bunch of raid enemies, for example regular missions, scrimmages, and specific joint firing drills, where her EX can be really effective against waves of enemies, especially if they're grouped up together, as she can destroy a whole lot of them pretty easily with the AoE effect during the second weaker explosion. Moreover, due to the nature of her EX, she can also act as a boss killer, being usable in raids. Most prominently, she is an excellent unit for Fuuka. In phase 1, her EX can actually hit all 5 ranges, and if you're able to group them together, she deals more damage as they will get hit by the weaker AoE explosions. For phase 2, you can still use her EX to focus all 5 hits on the robot, dealing a ton of damage to him, and this can even destroy his shield on insane difficulty or below, since this attack hits him 10 times, though not on Torment, seeing as you need to hit him 15 times to dispel his shield on this difficulty. Not to mention, New Haruna does have light armor, so she takes less damage from their piercing attacks on Insane and Torment. Plus again, her best use lies in the Fuel version of this raid, due to her S combat power in this terrain. Furthermore, in this raid, she is primarily used on Torment difficulty, where she can act as the hyper carry for one of your teams. But she would need to be at least UA40 to UA50 to truly be viable on this difficulty, since the bonus EE significantly increases her damage output. While she can still be used on Insane or below, most players prefer Aru over her for these difficulties, as the latter can clear the raid much faster due to her crits. Though again, that is not to say you can't use New Haruna. However, you can also use them together or in separate teams, especially when tackling Torment Kaiten. With all that being said, with the introduction of Dress Hina, who can basically blitz through this raid regardless of difficulty, New Haruna's pick rate has definitely plummeted, but you can definitely still utilize her if you aren't able to complete this raid in one team, even with Dress Hina. Other than Kaiten, you could maybe use her in Gregorius to take out a few of the quiet members with her EX, whilst having a small chance of increasing his debuff counter. On the other hand, she isn't a great fit for Hyro, cause even though she could theoretically concentrate fire on him with her EX, plus shred his exorbitant defense a little, she will take a lot more damage from his explosive attack on Insane and Torment. Lastly, she has seen quite a lot of use in Fuel PvP, since her EX can hit multiple enemy students at once, potentially wiping them out. Sadly though, the current PvP terrain is indoors, but she could be relevant again in a future Fuel PvP season. Overall, New Haruna is a strong explosive DPS student who has good AoE and single target damage capabilities, making her a great unit for content with a lot of raid mobs, PvP, and Fuel Kaiten. Thus, if you want a solid backup raid DPS option for Kaiten, or perhaps you're interested in PvP and you want to prepare for an upcoming Fuel version, then you can pull for her. Though, if you intend on really building her, you might want to go for UE40 to UE50 for the sweet extra EE. You may also pull if you don't already have her, since she is limited, or even if you own her, you could continue pulling to get more copies, so that again, you can get her to UE40 to UE50 if you want to. Or finally, if she is your waifu, to which I say, pull or die, my friend. However, if she is already in your roster, and you don't plan on using/building her, then you can just skip her to save for any upcoming units. or to pull for New Year Fuuka / New Year Akari, as I feel both of them are more important than New Year Haruna, especially the former. One more reason to skip her is if you literally just don't care about New Year Haruna, even though she is limited. Maybe because you're not a limited collector, or you fucking had it with a constant Fuuka kidnapping. But hey, think about it. You pull her so you can correct her to stop the Fuuka hate crimes. Big brain move, eh? And that's all for this week's review. All in all, New Year Fuuka is an absolutely essential unit, and you should definitely prioritize getting her if you don't already have her. For New Year Haruna, while she isn't as important as New Year Fuuka, she is still limited, so you might want to consider getting her too if you can. And while for New Year Akari, even though she is a pretty good unit, she is permanent after all, and isn't used as much, so you might want to skip her, though it's definitely up to you. Anyways, that's all from me. Let me know who you're pulling for if you are. Good luck with your pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.